be here.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, last but not least, Congresswoman, I can't say your name, Nicole Malliotakis.
Well, thank you all for your testimony, and thank you again to my colleague Jeff Van Drew for bringing us together today, because the issues that we're discussing today that are affecting New Jersey, they're also affecting my constituents in Staten Island and Brooklyn as well. And the bottom line is, whether it's the Northeast region or anywhere in the country, we are seeing energy prices that are soaring, families on fixed income, seniors that are living paycheck to paycheck on Social Security, and our small businesses. I mean, they are literally struggling, and it's probably worse in our region. We know it's worse because of the testimony we've heard here today, and it is because it's being compounded. It's the Biden-Harris policies on the federal level compounded with the state policies that we're seeing, whether it's Governor Murphy here or Governor Hochul in New York. And there is this rush to transform to clean energy, which I think we all want to do, right? We want to work toward that, but it has to be done on the free market and innovation, not mandates and regulations and destroying traditional energy sources that we desperately need and rely on, because we're seeing that impact. The cost is being driven up, and it's not just here, it's also at the pump, right? 4 years ago, we were paying on average $2.38 a gallon of gas. Now you're paying about 80 cents more than that, and that's because they raided the Strategic Petroleum Reserve just to bring down prices because we have an election coming up. Let's be honest about that. And energy fuels everything. What we're paying, not just at the gas pump, your utility bills, but food. Mr. Carter, the Farm Bureau, I'm glad you're here. I have no farms in my district, but my constituents eat. All right? And you know, we are also feeling the pain when we go to the grocery store. And I think Americans understand and see that correlation, that energy is used for everything, to manufacture, to produce food, to transport food, to refrigerate food, to cook food. So if energy costs go up, your food costs are going up as well. And a couple other comparisons I see with New York and New Jersey policy. Mr. Fisher, you mentioned that at the state level, Governor Murphy has established a goal to build 11 gigawatts of offshore wind, which is a more costly and unreliable source of energy that taxpayers are subsidizing. We're having that same proposals in New York. But you've also mentioned that New Jersey has adopted electric vehicle mandates, as the state of California has. All new cars sold in New Jersey will need to be electric by 2035. New York State also passed that same law. And I was in California, and a friend of mine has an electric car. And guess what? We got an alert on the phone saying, don't plug your car in now. Do not use any energy. Try to do it on off-peak hours, because they do not have the grid to support it. And we'll be seeing that same thing come 2035 if we don't reverse those laws. And I think we need to. And then at the state level, New Jersey has also embraced this, go green to electrify everything, and you're seeing that that has had a significant impact, as well as the moratorium on new nuclear power plants at a time when electricity demand is skyrocketing. Nuclear energy is a clean energy. We know that. Governor Cuomo, unfortunately in New York, closed our power plant. As I mentioned earlier, it was 26% of New York City's supply. So now they're moving to fossil fuels. So they're not achieving their goals, right? So it's really hypocritical to say, we want clean energy, and then we shut a nuclear power plant that then makes you rely on more fossil fuels. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. All I know is that our constituents are paying more as a result. So I would love to give you an opportunity, Mr. Fisher, just add to your points about what it means when we close, because in New York, they not just closed nuclear power plant, gas plants, they're not allowing them to expand. They're shutting down those requests. So what does that mean, and how is that going to drive up the costs and provide less reliable energy for New Yorkers and people in New Jersey?
Excellent question. I'll try to summarize it by it's supply and demand. We have growing demand, and that's a good thing. This is America. When demand grows, we meet it with new supply. The trouble is we have political constraints. In the case of the EPA rule saying you have to actually close down every single coal plant unless you can capture all the carbon, which is an impossible technology. EPA has created an impossible standard. We're going to have to close down every existing coal plant. We're not going to be able to build new gas plants, or if we try to finance them, they're not going to make sense. EPA has put a cap. You can only run it 40% of the time, EPA says. So we have to close existing coal. We can't build new gas. A lot of states say you can't build new nukes. What's going to happen is very predictable. This is increasing demand, which I think is a good thing. I love AI. We should be a high technology society. The trouble is the constraints on supply. So what we're seeing instead, just astronomical price increases. And that ultimately is going to constrain the amount, even if you wanted to electrify everything. I don't think that's good policy. Let's say you want to electrify everything. Why in the world would you also enact policies that double and triple the cost of electricity? It makes it impossible to electrify the things you want. None of it makes any sense. The federal level, we have boxed ourselves in by implementing, I think, impossible standards. And I strongly believe the EPA is going to get checked by the courts. The problem is they were free to do it on the front end. It's going to take probably 5 or 7 years to have the Supreme Court opinion on the merits that says you were never allowed to do this. But the policies are off the rails, and we need to check them.
And you mentioned something interesting. I think you mentioned this Inflation Reduction Act. I call it the Inflation Expansion Act. None of us voted for it, by the way. But what I will say is you brought up an interesting point about this, because we the people are not just paying for the increase in the commodity itself. Electricity has gone up. We're paying the increase in the utility delivery rates, which you've mentioned, you highlighted. That has gone up because now they have to actually change all their infrastructure, change these smart meters, do all these things to move with this transformation. But we're also, as a result of this legislation, right, that the Biden-Harris administration passed, that we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to end the use of natural gas. Would you like to talk about that?
That's essentially right. And the only way that it could possibly work, and I still think it won't, what we're hearing now is calls to build significant amounts of new transmission. We're talking high voltage lines that cut across people's property. What we're going to see is when people say we have to double the grid to accommodate the things we're subsidizing through the IRA, that itself is another cost. This is a package deal. You don't get the cheap electricity just because you put up a solar panel and then it's free forever. This is the kind of thing where it's going to take subsidies after subsidies. We're going to have to subsidize transmission, subsidize generation. All of it costs. And whether it comes through the tax code or through utility rates, we pay for it.
I want to thank you all. I just want to also just comment briefly on Audrey Lane's testimony. You mentioned how we could look to Europe to learn exactly where we're headed. And Europe was very reliant, still is, on foreign countries. Russia in particular, they had a real big reliance on. And how did that work out for them? Now they're scrambling to try to backtrack some of these policies, right? Reversing the closures of the nuclear plants, reversing some of these EV mandates. Can you touch on that real quick?
So in our report, and I highly recommend that people go onto our website, it's gardenstateinitiative.org. We actually do a case study on Germany. And for 20 years, the German energy market has been subsidized by the government in effect to make a more balanced energy grid. And at the result, at the end of those 20 years, yes, the grid changed, but the usage of energy changed about 1.5%. So they put all of this money in over 20 years, and at the end of the day, it changed 1% in the outset. And as a result of that 1%, the cost to consumers was 3 times what it was at the beginning of the experiment, if you will.
Well, thank you. And we see where we're going. We want to reverse that. I look forward to working with my colleagues. I look forward to working with you, Jeff, to fix this issue and also make sure that FERC holds this utility in Atlantic County accountable so that way your constituents can get the relief that they deserve. Thank you.